Okay, so in the last video that I did in this Microsoft Booking series, I looked at how we could start using Power Automate and start trying to figure out how these bookings that are made on the Microsoft Bookings site that you've got, how someone can go ahead and actually book a service, and what then happens in terms of that being created as a calendar event that's on the bookings calendar. So if you haven't watched that, go ahead, and that will be one of the other videos in this series, so I'll have a link to that in the description below, so watch that so you can kind of start figuring things out. But in this one, what I'm going to do is combine Microsoft Bookings Power Automate with Dynamics 365, and what we're going to be able to end up with is a nice little calendar here that we can use, and we can get an overview of all of our bookings from Microsoft Bookings, but get them into Dynamics. So let's go ahead and look and see how we can do that. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is within Dynamics, or basically within your Power Apps, so make.powerapps.com, you're going to make a solution. And this is not about how to create solutions. If you don't know, there's plenty of resources out there to show you. But all we need to do is we need to add in a new entity, and then we need to adjust the appointment entity. So the first thing that I'm going to look at is a new entity that I have created, and I've called this the booking calendar entity. And what this is going to do is allow us to create this record here where we can then display all of our bookings appointments onto a calendar control here that we see. So if I go back here, I've got a couple of fields that I've added. So let's go ahead and just look at these ones. So what I'm doing, first of all, is I want to be able to put in the email address that the Microsoft Bookings calendar is tied to, and then I'm also just going to give it a name. So that's it. That's all I'm doing on this specific entity. If I go back and I look at the appointment entity, so for this one, I'm going to add a few custom fields. And the first one is a 2 option field. So that's going to be yes or no. Is this a bookings appointment? I'm going to have a lookup to the bookings calendar entity that I've just shown you that I created. I'm then going to have an option set called service. And if I go ahead and just have a look at this, what I've done here is I've just basically started to put in services that are offered on my bookings, Microsoft Bookings calendar. So what services could somebody book? So I've got an option set there. And then the last one is a lookup to a user, and that is a staff member. So that's it in terms of the actual new fields that I'm going to be adding onto the appointment record. For the bookings calendar, if I go back to that entity and I go to forms, and here we've got our main form. And what we can see here, if we open this up in make.powerapps.com, we can see this lovely little message here. That's fine. I'm going to switch it to classic, and I'm going to show you what we can do. So what we can do is add a subgrid onto our form. And from the subgrid, we're going to show the related appointments for this specific booking calendar. So if I just go ahead and I look here, this is a subgrid for appointments. And let's go ahead and look at the properties. So we can see that we are showing related records. We are looking at appointments where that bookings calendar field, that new custom field, where we have related appointments for that booking calendar. Then what I'm going to do is I have a control that I can add. So if you didn't have one of these, you'd be able to click add control, and you'd be able to find the calendar control or the calendar control version 2, so that we can put on a calendar and display the appointments in a calendar view instead of just a list. All right, so that's everything that we need to do within Dynamics itself. Let's go ahead and look at our flow and see what we're going to be doing to get the appointments onto our calendar here. All right, so what I'm going to do first of all is we'll look at the start of our flow, and we're basically using the trigger from the Office 365 connector. And what we're doing is we're using when an event is added, updated, or deleted. And we have to have logged in and created a connection as that booking calendar. So we can see that connection there. All right, again, I mentioned the other video that I'd recently done, and that talks about this in more detail, so I'm not going to go into it as much in this one, but we basically then have a couple of steps here where we are initializing variables because we're going to use these later on and actually populate them with a specific value. So we can see we've got customer name, customer email, customer phone, contact GUID, consultant name, and staff member. And these are all string types where you do initialize variable and select the string option. Okay, so once we've got all of that, we are then going to check to see if the action type, which is coming from the event, if the action type is not equal to deleted. If it is equal, then we both basically won't be doing anything. So if it is equal to one of those, then we will go down this path, and what we'll do is we'll get the booking. So this is basically the get the event action, and we're going to again use the calendar ID that we used from the trigger at the top, and our item ID is going to be the item ID again from that specific trigger at the top. So we're going to get that booking. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get the start time and the end time from that event. And I'm just going to do an expression, and we're going to format the date and the time from the output, the start date and time. And we're just going to format it with the year, then the month and the day, and then the time in hours, minutes, and seconds. And we're going to do the same for the start time and for the end time. And we're going to use those later on. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the body from the event and we're going to convert that. That's basically HTML to text action step. And we're going to convert the email body into text. So we're stripping out all of the HTML. Then what we're going to do is we are going to set 3 of the variables. So we're going to set the customer name, the customer's email, and the customer phone. And again, I will put a link to the video where I explain each of these steps in more detail. But all we're doing here is we are using an expression to split out and extract the text that has been added in as the name. So when somebody fills out our booking form and they put in their name, we basically are getting that back in the description, in the body of the event. So we're basically then going to use this expression to extract and figure out what the name is, and then what the email is, and then what the phone number is. Then what we're going to do is we are going to get the category from the event, and that will give us the consultant's name. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use the variable. So we've set the variable here for the consultant's name, and we're going to use that variable to search and use the Office 365 users connector. And we're going to search for users where that is the consultant's name that we found here is found in Office 365. Now, this is only really going to work if you have the same users that you've set up in Microsoft Bookings as staff members, that you have those people as users in Office 365, and then they're also set up as users within Dynamics 365. So this is just showing you a way in which you can do it. If that's not always going to be the case, because maybe you have guest staff members, then you'll need to do some kind of step next to basically check to make sure that something has been pulled back from that search, and then decide what to do if nobody is found. So in this, I'm assuming that I have the exact match. So I've got a staff member who's also in Office 365 and also in Dynamics 365 as well. Then what I'm doing is I'm doing a list record step, and I am using the email address from this step here where we found the specific consultant, and we're basically doing a filter query to find users in Dynamics 365. So we're using the Common Data Service connector, and we're using the list record step. We're looking for users where the internal email address equals the email from the step where we search for users. So we're basically trying to find the match there. Then what we're doing is from the user that it's found, where it should just be finding one, again, if you have that match. And what we're doing is we're basically going to say, let's get the user ID from the user that was brought back in our list record step above. Now, because we're using these variables and we're populating them, what that means is even though we've populated them within these apply to each steps, we can then do something with that information outside of all of those apply to each steps. So now what we can do is we can check and we can see, is the booking that was made, is it new? So does the action type equal added? If yes, we'll go down this side. If no, we'll do something different, because if it's not added, we've already filtered out and said, well, if it's deleted, we're not going to do anything. If it's not added, then it must have been updated. So if it's added, we are going to, first of all, create an appointment record. So we're going to create the appointment and we're going to populate the fields with the data that we found previously. So we're going to populate the start and end time with the outputs from those steps that we had at the beginning. We're then going to use the customer name and then the subject from the event as the subject of the appointment. Then we're going to use the description from the step where we converted the HTML of the event into text. We're going to populate the location if we have one, so we can populate that. And then if we scroll down further, we are going to set the required attendees, and we're going to use the name of the entity that we created, which was that bookings calendar entity. And then we're going to use the ID from that bookings calendar record that I created. So here we have a bookings calendar record that I created. I gave it a name. I put in an email address just for reference. But that record that was created has an ID, which I can get from the top here. If I look in the URL, I can get that ID from there. So I'm using that to link the appointment to that and set it as the required attendee. Then if I look at show advanced options further down, I can set the staff member as a system user, the one that I've got from that variable where we populated the ID. And then with the service, what I'm going to need to do here is I'm going to need to do some if statements and basically say, okay, well, if the, oh, didn't mean to do that. Let's undo that. There we go. So if the subject of the, depending on what the subject of the event is, I'm looking for that subject because it will actually be populated with whatever service it is that they booked. So if the subject is initial free consultation, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, use this value to populate the service option set. And the value is going to be whatever the ID is from that value in the option set. So if I just go back here, and we'll go back to the appointment where we've added in this option set. So we can see here, there's the service. And if I look at the option set and I look at view more, when I'm on one of the values, I'll see, well, there's the label that I gave it, but that's the value that I need to use from the option set in my expression. So I've got, if it's initial free consultation, then populate it with that value. Otherwise, if it is premium consultation, then I'm going to use a different value to populate it so that I can pass through the correct service and add that onto the appointment. All right, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the contact to see if that person that submitted the booking is already in Dynamics. So we're going to do another list record step, and we are going to search with a filter query saying email address equals, and then we're going to check to see, does it equal the customer email, what's come out of that customer email variable. Now I've added a little trim step here that will basically get rid of any white space if there were spaces before or after the email when somebody submitted it. We don't want that, so I'm just trimming that out to make sure that we don't have any white space on there. Then what I'm doing is, after I've searched for the contact, I want to check and I want to see, well, was the number of records found, was it 0? Was it 1? If it was neither of those, I'm not going to do anything. So I'm doing an expression where we're basically checking how many records were returned. So the length of that, how many records have we found? If it's 0, I want to create a new contact record. So again, we're going to do some expressions and we're going to trim any possible white space. The only 3 options that I have is the name, the phone number, and the email address. I'm going to populate those values. Now, if you notice that we've got just the last name being populated, that's because when someone fills out their name, it's one field and both the first and the last name are going to go in there. You could do something to try and split that out. It's not always going to be accurate though, so that's up to you if you want to do that. I've just populated it into the last name because it's required, and then I can always adjust it later on if needed. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to update the appointment that I just created, and I'm going to update it and link it to that contact and set it as regarding that specific contact. So here I'm going to put the name of the entity, which is going to be in a plural format. So it's going to be contacts. And then in brackets, we're going to put the contact ID from the record that we just created here. If one contact is found, that's great. That's the only one that we have with that same email address. So from there, what we're going to do is we're simply going to update the appointment and we're going to link it to the contact record that we found. So we're updating the appointment with the existing contact and we're going to again set the regarding in our regarding contacts field. All right, so that's everything we're doing if it was a new booking that had just been added. So if we go back up here, we've basically checked to see, was the action type, does it equal added? If it does, we went through all of that and we had to add our appointment record to Dynamics. If not, then it must have been updated. So we're going to do a couple of things again that are similar, but this time we're going to be getting the contact, using the query to say we're looking for any contacts that have the email address that has come from the booking form when they submitted it. And then what we're going to do is we are going to get the contact GUID from there, because if it's been updated, then that appointment should already be in Dynamics and the contact should already be in there. Again, you could add some checks and conditions if you wanted to. Then what we need to do is we need to find the related appointment. So this is where it's important to make sure that you're then doing something with your appointment records in Dynamics to update them and make sure that they are marked as complete. So I have a query that is saying, I want the bookings appointment to equal to true. So that 2 option field where I said yes or no, it's going to be a booking appointment. That should be yes. I'm looking for appointments where that is yes. And where the state code equals 0, which means it's an open appointment, has not been closed or marked as complete. And that the regarding object ID equals the contact GUID that we've put into this variable here. So again, this really is dependent on how well you're updating your data, how clean your data is. But in theory, you should then be coming back with 1 appointment. Unless, of course, somebody could book multiple appointments on one day, and then it's going to be a lot harder to find. So you've got to keep in mind that there are certainly drawbacks or flaws in this just because of the way in which the data is stored. Then what we're going to do is we are going to check to make sure that the number of appointments that we found is equal to 1. If it is, then what we're going to do is we're going to update that appointment that we found with the new date and time that has come through on that updated appointment. So we are updating and setting what the end time is, and then further down we've got the start time as well. So we're going to be updating that. So it's quite a long flow, and every single step of this is in the related blog post that you'll be able to find the description, a link in the description. But ultimately what's going to happen is if I go to my activities, when I've created a new appointment, what I'm going to have is if I go into, let's look at this one, I'm going to have an appointment that will be created where the required the required field is set to the booking calendar. I've then got the subject, which is the name of the person plus the service that they've booked. We can see the location. This is going to be online. We've got the regarding field that has been populated. We've got the start time and the end time. We can then see that, yes, it is a bookings appointment. We've got the bookings calendar that it's linked to, the staff member, and then the service has been populated as well. And then over on the right, we've got the description. Now on the appointment form, what I've got is a link to the bookings calendar. So if I then click on this, this is how we are then able to see an overview of all of our Microsoft Bookings appointments within Dynamics by using this calendar control. So there is a lot to this. It's probably one of the longest videos I've done for a while. And it's a long flow, so there's a lot to kind of think about. But like I said, the blog post will be a step-by-step of every single action that you have to add to the flow. So it'll talk you through, and hopefully that will help in combination with this video. So let me know what you think. Like I said, it is not without, not necessarily holes, but you have to really be on top of the data and making sure that you're keeping things up to date. At the moment, if somebody deletes an appointment or deletes their booking, it will not delete it from Dynamics, but that will be something else I will be digging into hopefully in a future video. So let me know what you think in the comments. Hi, I'm Megan Walker. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you learned something from it. If you don't want to miss out on any other content, you can go ahead and click on my face below to subscribe. And if you want to watch the next video, you can do that by clicking over here and go ahead and get started. Thanks again.